Girl sees unconscious millionaire on the road while a mountain lion watches. Then she does this. Comment what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and let me know what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you enjoyed my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sun was rising lazily over the hills of Oakhaven, Virginia, as Lily began another morning walk along the dusty road that snaked its way to the center of the small town. Her bare feet knew every stone on the path, every pothole disguised by the dry earth that the last winter had left even more cracked. The girl, only 4 years old, carried a worn cloth bag in her arms, where she kept the few belongings she had in the world. A few coins earned from small favors, a piece of soap found in the town square, and a corn-husk doll she had made herself. Lily had been wandering the streets of Oakhaven for 2 years, surviving on the occasional kindness of the local residents. Her tanned skin was marked by the relentless sun. Her curly hair formed a small, rebellious crown around her thin face, but her brown eyes shone with a precocious intelligence that impressed anyone who knew her. The girl had learned early to distrust the promises of adults, but she had also discovered that her cheerful and spontaneous presence could draw smiles from even the hardest of hearts. On that particular morning, Lily was walking towards Mr. Peterson's general store, where she used to help unload vegetables in exchange for a sweet roll and a glass of milk. The familiar route unfolded peacefully under the grey-blue sky when something unexpected caught her attention. About 50 yards ahead, a human figure lay motionless in the middle of the road, dressed in clothes that seemed too expensive for someone who normally traveled these rural paths. Lily slowed her pace instinctively. Her experience on the streets had taught her that strange situations often meant danger, especially for a lone, vulnerable child. But there was something in the way the man was positioned, with one arm outstretched as if he had tried to reach for something before losing consciousness, that awakened her natural compassion. It was then that she saw it. A magnificent mountain lion with a golden coat stood completely still, about 20 yards from the unconscious man. The feline showed no aggression, but its presence there, so close to someone defenseless, made Lily's heart race. She knew the stories that circulated through the town about the large cats that occasionally came down from the mountains in search of water or food, especially during the most intense droughts. The man was tall and robust, appearing to be over 50, with carefully combed grey hair and a well-trimmed beard that contrasted with his vulnerable position on the ground. His clothes, a light blue dress shirt and fine fabric trousers, were dirty with dust, but still revealed someone of means. A golden watch gleamed on his left wrist, and Lily noticed that he was breathing irregularly, as if struggling. The situation was dangerous for her, but the girl couldn't simply walk on knowing someone needed help. Her mother, in the few years they had lived together, had always told her that helping others was the most important thing a person could do in the world. Even though this lesson had come from someone who later abandoned her, Lily carried these values deeply engraved in her heart. Taking a deep breath to gather her courage, the girl began to shout as loudly as she could, clapping her hands and making sharp movements with her arms. Her childlike voice echoed through the quiet morning, breaking the rural tranquility with a sound that mixed desperation and determination. The mountain lion slowly raised its head, its yellow eyes fixing on Lily with an intensity that made her blood run cold. "Get out of here! Go away!" she yelled, her voice trembling but firm. "Leave the man alone!" The feline remained watching for long seconds that felt like an eternity to Lily. She could feel her own heart beating so hard she was sure the mountain lion could hear it too. But there was something in the animal's gaze that didn't seem predatory. It was almost as if it were waiting, assessing the situation as much as she was. Continuing her shouts and movements, Lily noticed that the man on the ground began to show small signs of consciousness. His fingers twitched slightly, and he let out a low groan that was muffled by the dirt. The proximity of the mountain lion became more worrying with each second, and the girl knew she had to act fast. Her screams finally had an effect. The mountain lion, perhaps annoyed by the noise or simply uninterested in a confrontation, rose majestically and began to move away with slow, calculated steps. Lily watched the feline disappear among the trees that lined the road, feeling immense relief but still remaining alert. It was then that she heard the sound of approaching voices. 3 local residents, including Mr. Peterson himself, appeared running down the road, drawn by the girl's cries. When they saw the scene, Lily standing next to a well-dressed man unconscious, on the ground, they stopped abruptly, trying to understand what had happened. "Lily, what happened here?" asked Mr. Peterson, a 60-year-old man with a grey mustache and hands calloused from farm work. "There was a mountain lion here, Mr. Peterson. The man was on the ground and it was looking at him. I scared it away by shouting," explained the girl, pointing in the direction where the feline had disappeared. The unconscious man was Arthur Cunningham, though Lily didn't know that yet. He was known throughout the region as the owner of the largest agribusiness company in Oakhaven, an enterprise that employed 50 people and sustained much of the local economy. Arthur had a reputation for being generous with his employees and strict in business, but he was also known for his stubbornness in never accepting help from anyone, always insisting he could solve any problem on his own. As the men knelt beside Arthur, checking his vital signs and discussing how to transport him to the nearest hospital, Lily remained at a respectful distance, watching everything with curiosity. There was something about that man's face that stirred a strange feeling in her chest, a mixture of concern and affection. She couldn't explain. The sun was higher now, fully illuminating the scene that would forever change the life of that street girl and the prosperous businessman. Without knowing it, they had both just taken the first step on a journey that would test their limits, reveal long-buried family secrets, and prove that the most unexpected encounters can redefine entire destinies. The Oakhaven Community Hospital had never received a patient under such peculiar circumstances. Arthur Cunningham was transported in the bed of Mr. Peterson's pickup truck, with Lily insisting on accompanying the journey, sitting next to the unconscious man, holding his hand with a dedication that moved everyone present. During the 20-minute drive along the winding roads that led to the town centre, Lily did not let go of Arthur's hand for a second. She spoke to him softly, as if he could hear her through his unconsciousness, telling him about the birds flying over the road and the wildflowers growing on the roadside. There was something instinctive in her need to protect this stranger, as if she recognized in him a vulnerability that mirrored her own. At the hospital, a small unit with only 12 beds that served the entire rural region, Dr. Samuel Miller took on Arthur's case with the seriousness the situation required. The doctor, a thin man of 55 who knew almost every resident of Oakhaven, was intrigued to find that the patient showed no obvious external injuries, but was in a state of deep unconsciousness for more than 2 hours. Lily remained in the hospital corridor, even after being gently asked to leave several times. She settled in a corner, hugging her cloth bag, watching every move of the doctors and nurses intently. When asked about her relationship with the patient, the girl simply replied that he was her friend and that she was sure he would be fine. It took 6 hours for Arthur to finally wake up. When he opened his eyes, his first words were confused and disjointed. He looked around without recognizing where he was, his hands trembled slightly, and when he tried to sit up in the hospital bed, an intense dizziness forced him to lie down again. Where am I?" he murmured, his voice hoarse and weak. Dr. Miller approached the bed, checking Arthur's vital signs carefully. You're at the Oakhaven Hospital, Mr. Cunningham. You were found unconscious on the country road. Do you remember anything? Arthur closed his eyes, forcing his mind to retrieve memories of the last few days. There were confusing fragments, disconnected images that did not form a coherent narrative. He vaguely remembered being in his office, discussing important contracts, but after that, a complete blank. I can't remember the last few days, he admitted, a growing concern taking over his expression. What day is it? When the doctor told him the date, Arthur realized with horror that he had completely lost 3 days of his life. 3 crucial days during which important decisions should have been made at his company. His first reaction was to try to get up and leave immediately, but his body did not respond properly to his commands. It was at that moment that Lily appeared at the door of the room. She had bribed a nurse with her natural charm and managed to get permission for a quick visit. In her small hands, she carried a clumsy bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the hospital garden. "Hi, mister," she said with a radiant smile, approaching the bed with the confidence of someone who has known the person for years. "You woke up! I knew you'd be okay." Arthur looked at the small, tanned girl, trying to understand why she was there. There was something familiar in her brown eyes, but he couldn't place it. Do you know me, little girl?" "Of course I do. I scared away the mountain lion that was near you on the road. My name is Lily, and what's yours?" "Arthur," he replied automatically, still processing the information about the mountain lion. "There was a mountain lion?" Lily nodded vigorously, placing the flowers in a glass of water she found on the bedside table. "A really big one, but it wasn't mean. I think it was just curious. I yelled really loud and it went away." Over the next few minutes, Lily recounted in detail how she had found Arthur, how she had scared away the mountain lion, and how she had insisted on accompanying him to the hospital. Her childish narrative, full of irrelevant details, but told with touching sincerity, brought the first clear images back to Arthur's confused memory. He began to vaguely remember a sudden pain in his head, a feeling of total disorientation, and falling on the road while walking back home after leaving his car at the workshop for repairs. But there were huge gaps in his memories, important pieces that simply no longer existed. "Lily is a special girl," Dr. Miller commented when the child left the room to get more water. "She hasn't left here since you arrived. Said she wanted to make sure you'd be okay." "She doesn't have a family?" Arthur asked, an unexpected concern rising in his chest. "She's been living on the streets for a few years. The townspeople look after her as they can, but, well, you know how hard it is for a child alone." This information affected Arthur in a surprising way. There was something in that girl's determination, in her courage to face a mountain lion to protect a complete stranger, that touched a part of his soul he thought had been dead for a long time. Since losing his wife 5 years ago, Arthur had closed himself off emotionally, dedicating himself exclusively to work and avoiding deep personal connections. When Lily returned with the glass full of fresh water, she found Arthur sitting up in bed, still weak but visibly more alert. "How did you know you should help me?" he asked, genuinely curious about the child's motivations. "My mom always said that helping others is the most important thing in the world," Lily replied naturally, arranging the flowers in the glass. "And you looked like you needed help." "Your mother? Where is she now?" The sparkle in Lily's eyes dimmed slightly. "She left a long time ago, but I remember the things she taught me." Dr. Miller returned to the room with test results, interrupting the conversation. "Mr. Cunningham, I need to talk to you about your condition. The tests show signs of severe stress and possible intoxication. Have you been eating properly, taking any medication recently?" Arthur tried to concentrate, but his recent memory remained fragmented. I'm not sure. My sister Victoria has been taking care of the house and the food since I've been facing some difficulties. The doctor made careful notes, his expression worried. I'll need to run some more detailed tests. For now, you should rest. Your blood pressure is still unstable. As Dr. Miller left the room to prepare new tests, Lily approached Arthur's bed. You look sad, she observed with the sharp perception that children often possess. Is it because of your sister? The question caught Arthur off guard. Victoria had taken over the household duties after his wife's death, claiming she wanted to help her widowed brother overcome his grief. In recent months, he had noticed some strange behavior from her, but had attributed it to the stress of caring for someone in a depressive state. My sister has been very helpful, he said carefully, not wanting to worry the girl with complex family issues. Sometimes people who seem to be helping are actually not, Lily commented, with a wisdom that surprised Arthur. I learned that living on the street. That night, as Arthur tried to sleep in the hospital, his mind kept returning to Lily's words. There was something deeply disturbing about his memory loss, something that went beyond simple stress or fatigue. And the presence of that brave girl, who had risked her own safety to protect him, awakened feelings he had buried long ago. Outside the hospital, Lily slept wrapped in a blanket a compassionate nurse had given her, determined to stay close until she was sure her new friend was fully recovered. She had no idea that she had saved more than Arthur's life. She had inadvertently begun to unravel a web of manipulation that threatened to destroy everything he had built. The next morning, Arthur was discharged from the hospital with recommendations for absolute rest and psychological follow-up. Dr. Miller had insisted that the symptoms suggested more than simple exhaustion, but without being able to identify exactly what the problem was. When Arthur asked to use the hospital phone to contact his company, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. Mr. Cunningham, said the receptionist at Cunningham Agribusiness with a hesitant voice, Ms. Victoria informed us that you were admitted for psychiatric treatment and that she would temporarily take over the company's administration. The words echoed in Arthur's mind like a distorted echo. Psychiatric treatment? He had only spent one night in the hospital for loss of consciousness. That's a misunderstanding, he said, trying to stay calm. I'll be there within the hour to clear everything up. Sir, I'm sorry, but Ms. Victoria presented medical documents and a power of attorney. The employees are confused, but she said you were in no condition to make business decisions. Arthur hung up the phone with trembling hands. Victoria had lied about his condition and had somehow obtained documents that legitimized her version of events. How was that possible? He had only been unconscious for a few hours, not long enough for his sister to obtain legal authorization to take over the company. Lily, who had spent the night at the hospital and was helping the nurses with small tasks in exchange for food, immediately noticed the change in Arthur's expression. What happened? She asked, approaching with the natural concern of someone who genuinely cares. Problems at the company, he murmured, still processing the information. My sister, she told people I'm sick. You don't look sick, Lily observed with her childish honesty. You just look tired. Why would she lie? The girl's simple question hit the core of the issue Arthur didn't want to face yet. Why would Victoria lie? What advantage would she gain by spreading false information about his mental state? And most importantly, how had she obtained false medical documents so quickly? The journey back to his home on the outskirts of Oakhaven was tense and silent. Lily had insisted on accompanying him, claiming he was still weak and might need help. Arthur didn't have the heart to refuse the girl's company, as her presence brought a strange sense of calm amidst the chaos his life had become. The Cunningham estate was one of the most beautiful in the region, with a two-story colonial-style house surrounded by orchards that stretched as far as the eye could see. Well-kept gardens framed the main building, and a circular fountain in the center of the front courtyard completed the idyllic scene. It was the result of 3 generations of hard work in agriculture. When they arrived, they found Victoria on the main porch, talking on the phone with someone in a conspiratorial tone. She was a slim, elegant woman of 48, with brown hair always impeccably styled and clothes that bespoke good taste and wealth. Seeing her brother approach, she quickly ended the call and forced a worried smile. "Arthur, you gave me such a scare!" she exclaimed, rushing to hug him. "When I heard you had fainted on the road, I feared the worst. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," he replied coolly, noticing how his sister's hug seemed more performative than genuine. "But I need to understand what happened to my company. Why did you tell the employees I was in psychiatric treatment?" Victoria's expression faltered for a fraction of a second before she recomposed herself. "Arthur, you're confused. The doctor told me you might have episodes of disorientation. I just said you needed rest, nothing more." "That's not true," he insisted, feeling his frustration grow. "The receptionist specifically told me you mentioned psychiatric treatment and presented documents." Victoria noticed Lily for the first time, and her expression hardened visibly. "Who is this girl? Why did you bring a street child to our home?" The rudeness in Victoria's tone when referring to Lily awakened an unexpected anger in Arthur. "This girl saved my life. If it weren't for her, I could have been attacked by a mountain lion." "A mountain lion?" Victoria repeated with obvious disbelief. "Arthur, you're delirious. There haven't been mountain lions in this region for decades." Lily, who had remained quiet until then, stepped forward. "I saw the mountain lion, Mum. It was right next to him when I arrived. I scared it away by shouting." "The fantasies of an abandoned child are not evidence of anything," Victoria retorted coldly. "Arthur, you need to rest. You're clearly confused and impressionable." At that moment, something crystallized in Arthur's mind. The way Victoria dismissed Lily's testimony, how she tried to undermine her credibility, how she insisted he was confused despite feeling more lucid with each passing minute. There was a pattern of manipulation he was beginning to recognize. "I want to see the documents you presented at the company," he said firmly. "What documents?" Victoria asked, but her voice betrayed nervousness. "The medical documents and the power of attorney that supposedly authorize you to take over the company." Victoria fell silent for a few seconds, clearly searching for an answer. "Arthur, you're being paranoid. There are no such documents. I just explained to the employees that you were sick and needed time to recover." But Arthur had noticed something crucial. His sister had confirmed the existence of the documents by trying to deny them afterward. She had said, "What documents?" as if she didn't know what he was talking about, but then had specified exactly which documents he had mentioned. Lily, watching the conversation intently, sensed the growing tension between the siblings. There was something in the way the woman looked at her that made her feel uncomfortable, as if she was seen as a threat. The girl had developed a keen instinct for detecting people who might be dangerous. "May I use the restroom?" she asked innocently. Victoria gestured distractedly towards the inside of the house, still focused on her argument with Arthur. It was a mistake she would soon realize was crucial. Lily entered the house and, instead of looking for the bathroom, went silently to Arthur's office, which she had noticed through the open windows. Her life on the streets had taught her to be observant and to seize opportunities when they arose. In the office, she found several papers scattered on the desk, including documents with the letterhead of a hospital from Richmond that she couldn't read, but which looked official. There was also a power of attorney with signatures that, even to her childish eyes, looked different from Arthur's signature she had seen at the hospital. But what caught her attention most was an old tape recorder on a shelf, still with the tape inside. Lily had seen similar devices in the homes of some town residents and knew how they worked. On impulse, she pressed the play button. Victoria's voice echoed through the office. "I need you to understand that Arthur is becoming unstable. The episodes are becoming more frequent. Yes, he may seem normal for periods, but the doctors have confirmed that he is no longer fit to run a company." Lily heard footsteps approaching and quickly turned off the device, hiding behind the curtain. Victoria entered the office, collected some papers from the desk, and left again, not noticing the girl's presence. When she returned to the porch, Lily found Arthur and Victoria still arguing, but now in lower tones. She approached Arthur and whispered, "I need to talk to you alone." Victoria intercepted, "The girl needs to leave. It's not appropriate for street children to frequent our property." "Lily stays," Arthur said, with an authority that surprised even himself. "She saved my life and is my guest." The tension in the air was palpable as Victoria retreated into the house, claiming to have important calls to make. As soon as they were alone, Lily told Arthur about the tape recorder and the conversation she had heard. The girl's words confirmed Arthur's worst fears. His sister was deliberately spreading lies about his mental condition, constructing a narrative to justify taking control of his assets. But why? And more importantly, how far was she willing to go to get what she wanted? That night, for the first time in years, Arthur felt truly alone and vulnerable in his own home, knowing that the person he trusted most was plotting against him. But there was also something new, the certainty that a brave 4-year-old girl was on his side, willing to protect him as much as he was willing to protect her. Over the next few days, Arthur tried to piece together the lost fragments of his memory while discreetly observing Victoria's movements. His sister had become strangely attentive, personally preparing all his meals and insisting he take special supplements that, according to her, would help his recovery. Every gesture of care seemed calculated, and Arthur began to suspect that his condition was not the result of natural stress. Lily had established her own routine on the property, despite Victoria's constant protests. She woke up before sunrise and helped the farmhands with small tasks, always keeping her ears open for suspicious conversations. The girl had developed a special talent for becoming invisible when necessary, a skill she had acquired during her years living on the streets. It was during one of these mornings that she witnessed a phone conversation that would completely change the course of her informal investigation. Victoria was in the kitchen, preparing Arthur's breakfast, when her cell phone rang. Lily, hidden behind the ajar door, heard every word with crystal clarity. "Yes, doctor, I understand perfectly," Victoria said in a honeyed voice. "My brother has been showing episodes of aggression and paranoia. Yesterday, he accused me of trying to poison his food. It's exactly as you predicted would happen." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. "Of course, I'm keeping the medication mixed in his food. He refuses to take it consciously," Victoria continued. "When can we schedule the evaluation for commitment? I need to resolve this situation soon, before he causes damage to the company or himself." Lily felt her blood run cold. Victoria was deliberately poisoning Arthur, using medication to confuse his mind and create evidence of mental instability. The girl knew she had to tell Arthur everything immediately, but she also understood that she would need more proof for him to fully believe the extent of his sister's betrayal. When Victoria finished the call and headed to Arthur's room with the breakfast tray, Lily followed her silently through the corridors of the house. She hid behind an ornamental vase in the hallway and watched her adoptive sister enter the room with a perfectly rehearsed false smile. "Good morning, Arthur," Victoria said cheerfully. "I brought your favorite breakfast and those supplements the doctor recommended." "I'm not hungry," Arthur replied, his growing suspicion making him avoid anything prepared by his sister. You need to eat to regain your strength. Look how thin you are, she insisted, approaching the bed. At least take the supplements. They're essential for your neurological recovery. Arthur took the glass with the orange liquid Victoria offered him, but hesitated before drinking. There was something in the smell that seemed familiar, but he couldn't identify what. It was at that moment that Lily ran into the room, pretending to be playing. "Uncle Arthur! Uncle Arthur!" she shouted, using the affectionate term she had naturally adopted. "Come see the birds in the garden! They're building nests!" The interruption caught Victoria off guard. During the moment of distraction, Lily took the opportunity to accidentally knock the glass from Arthur's hands, causing the liquid to spill on the floor. "Look what you've done, you girl," Victoria exclaimed with barely concealed anger. "Now I'll have to prepare everything all over again." "It was an accident, ma'am," Lily said with rehearsed innocence. "Can I help clean up?" "No need," Victoria replied coldly. "You've caused enough trouble already." When his sister left the room to get cleaning supplies, Lily quickly whispered to Arthur, "Don't drink anything she prepares. She's putting medicine in your food to make you confused." Arthur looked at the girl in surprise. "How do you know that?" "I heard her talking on the phone. She told someone she's mixing medication in your food and that you need to be committed." The revelation hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. His vague suspicions turned into a terrible certainty. Victoria was deliberately poisoning him, using his trust as a brother to administer drugs that affected his mind and his ability to reason. In the following days, Arthur began to refuse all meals prepared by Victoria, claiming a lack of appetite. Lily secretly helped him, bringing fruits from the orchard and water from alternative wells on the property. Gradually, his mind began to clear, the fogs of confusion dissipated, and he regained the sharpness of thought he hadn't felt in weeks. It was when his memory truly returned that Arthur discovered the extent of the problem. He remembered signing important contracts the week before his collapse, but now suspected that his signature had been forged on documents he didn't recall seeing. Victoria had taken advantage of the periods when he was under the influence of the medication to make him sign papers that transferred administrative powers to her. The company that had taken 3 generations to build was being systematically plundered by his own sister. Fraudulent contracts had been signed in his name, impossible financial commitments had been made, and traditional suppliers were being replaced by companies Arthur had never heard of. Lily noticed Arthur's growing anguish and decided to take more direct action. She knew they needed concrete evidence of Victoria's actions, proof that could not be contested or distorted. Thus began her own investigation, using her innocent appearance and her ability to go unnoticed to gather information. Over the next few weeks, the girl discreetly listened in on several of Victoria's phone conversations, memorized names mentioned, and observed documents left on tables. Her sharp visual memory, developed by the need for survival on the streets, allowed her to recall details that adults often ignored. That's how she discovered the name Sebastian Aguilard, mentioned repeatedly in Victoria's conversations. The man seemed to be her main contact, someone who was facilitating the sale of parts of the company and the rural property. Lily didn't fully understand the financial implications, but she understood that something very valuable was being stolen from Arthur. The situation became even more complicated when Victoria began to pressure Arthur to sign new documents, claiming they were necessary to regularize pending tax issues. She had scheduled a meeting with a lawyer for the following week, insisting that Arthur's presence was indispensable. "They're just formalities," she explained with forced patience. "Bureaucratic matters related to business succession. Nothing you need to worry about." But Arthur was no longer willing to blindly trust his sister. His recovered mental clarity had brought back his natural business acumen, and he recognized manipulation tactics when he saw them. Victoria was trying to make him sign documents that would formalize his mental incapacity and permanently transfer control of the company to her. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. Arthur felt like a prisoner in his own home, surrounded by someone he had trusted his whole life, and who now revealed a cruel and calculating side he had never imagined existed. His employees at the company had been instructed by Victoria not to accept direct orders from him, claiming he was in treatment and had no authority to make decisions. It was Lily who offered a different perspective on the situation. "Uncle Arthur," she said, on a particularly difficult afternoon, "when I lived on the street and someone tried to hurt me, I didn't just stand there waiting. I ran, asked for help, made noise until someone listened to me." "But she's my sister," Arthur murmured, still struggling to fully accept the reality of the betrayal. "How can I fight against my own family?" "Sometimes real family isn't the one we're born with," Lily replied with wisdom beyond her years. "It's the one that chooses to stay by our side when we need it." That night, while Victoria slept, Arthur made a decision that would change the course of everything. He and Lily would secretly leave the property in the morning and seek outside help. But when they woke before dawn, they discovered that Victoria had anticipated their plans and taken measures to prevent them from leaving the house. When Arthur tried to open the main door of the house in the early morning, he found it had been padlocked from the outside. The ground floor windows had been secured with additional locks, and even the back door leading to the yard was blocked. Victoria had turned the family home into a prison overnight. Lily, who had woken up to the sound of Arthur trying to force the locks, found him sitting on the living room stairs, his head in his hands. The frustration and despair on his face were clear evidence of how the situation had escalated beyond any reasonable expectation. "She's locked us in," he murmured, his voice filled with disbelief. "My own sister has imprisoned us in my own house." "Are there other ways out?" Lily asked pragmatically, her experience on the streets teaching her to always look for alternatives when a route was blocked. Arthur looked up, suddenly remembering the attic window that led to the roof. It was an exit Victoria had probably forgotten, considering no one had used it for years. Together, they silently climbed to the top floor and found the retractable ladder that led to the attic. The dusty space was filled with old furniture and boxes of family documents. Lily, smaller and more agile, managed to reach the high window and open it, allowing them both to get out onto the colonial tiled roof. The sun had not yet fully risen, and the morning damp made the tiles slippery and dangerous. They carefully descended using a side trellis of the house, but when they reached the garden, they discovered that Victoria had hired 2 men to watch the property. They were stationed near the main gate, clearly instructed to prevent any escape attempt. "We need to get to town without being seen," Arthur whispered, guiding Lily through the orchards that surrounded the house. "If we can get to Father Benedict, he can help us." Father Benedict was a respected figure in Oakhaven, known for mediating family conflicts and for his unquestionable integrity. If anyone could offer protection and guidance in this impossible situation, it would be him. They walked for nearly 2 hours through the orchards, avoiding the main roads and staying hidden among the rows of trees. Lily, used to walking long distances, endured the walk well, but Arthur was visibly weakened by the effects of the medication he had been taking for weeks. When they finally reached the church in the center of Oakhaven, they found Father Benedict preparing for the 6 o'clock morning mass. The priest, a 67-year-old man with white hair and kind eyes, had known the Cunningham family for decades and was shocked to see Arthur's condition. "My son, what happened to you?" the priest asked, noticing Arthur's pallor and the tremor in his hands. "Victoria told me you were under medical treatment, but she didn't mention anything about you looking so frail." "Father, I need your help," Arthur said, his voice choked with emotion. My sister is trying to have me forcibly committed and steal my company. She has been giving me medication without my knowledge." Father Benedict invited them into the sacristy, a private room where they could talk without being interrupted. Lily remained quiet as Arthur related everything he had discovered in recent weeks, from the memory loss to the evidence of pharmacological manipulation. "These are very serious accusations," the priest said carefully. "Victoria has always seemed like a woman devoted to her family. Are you sure you're not misinterpreting her intentions?" It was then that Lily spoke, recounting in detail the phone conversations she had overheard, the documents she had seen, and the way Victoria behaved when she thought she was alone. Her childish but precise and coherent narrative impressed the priest with the amount of detail that only someone who had actually witnessed those situations could know. "This child has a remarkable memory," Father Benedict observed, "and I don't believe a girl her age would be capable of inventing such elaborate and specific lies." During the conversation, they discovered that Victoria had approached the priest the previous week, claiming concern for Arthur's mental health. She had suggested that he was having hallucinations and episodes of paranoia, asking for special prayers for his recovery. It was part of her strategy to build a consistent narrative about her brother's mental instability. "Now I understand why she came to see me," the priest said, his expression becoming grave. "She was preparing the ground to validate her version of the facts." Arthur felt a mixture of relief and terror as he realized the extent of Victoria's web of manipulation. She had thought of every detail, preparing witnesses and creating a network of false evidence that would support her. Each side of the story. It was at that moment that the sacristy phone rang. The priest answered and, after a brief conversation, hung up with a worried expression. That was Victoria. She said Arthur had run away during the night, taking a street child with him, and that he was in a state of psychotic breakdown. She asked me to notify her immediately if you showed up here. The speed with which Victoria had mobilized a response to their escape demonstrated the level of control she had established over the situation. Arthur realized that his sister had probably contacted not only the priest, but all the influential people in town, constructing a version of events that painted him as mentally unstable and dangerous. "She'll be here soon," the priest said. "You need a safe place to stay while we decide how to proceed." It was Lily who suggested the solution. "Mr. Peterson has a small house behind his store. He likes me and might let us stay there." Mr. Peterson, the shopkeeper who had helped rescue Arthur on the road, was one of the few people in Oakhaven who knew both Arthur and Lily personally and who had witnessed their initial encounter. He would be a natural ally against Victoria's allegations. Before they could leave the church, they heard the sound of an approaching car. Victoria had arrived, accompanied by a man Arthur didn't recognize, probably the doctor she had spoken to on the phone about the forced commitment. Father Benedict acted quickly, hiding Arthur and Lily in the small storage room attached to the sacristy while he received the visitors. Through the thin wall, they could hear every word of the ensuing conversation. "Father, my brother is very sick," Victoria said in a tearful voice that sounded convincingly concerned. "Dr. Maurice can better explain his condition, but he's having delusions and has become a danger to himself and others." "It's a classic case of stress-induced psychosis," the doctor confirmed with an authoritative voice. "The patient has developed paranoia towards his own family and is projecting his fantasies onto innocent people, including vulnerable children." "I'm very worried about this girl he took," Victoria continued. "She's a street child he has illegally adopted. In his current mental state, he could be a danger to her." Hearing those words, Arthur felt an anger like he had never experienced. Victoria was using his fabricated condition to justify separating him from Lily, the only person who had stood by him through this whole ordeal. Father Benedict responded diplomatically, promising to contact them if Arthur appeared, but not revealing that they were hidden just a few feet away. When they finally left, the priest returned to the storage room with a grim expression. "The situation is worse than I imagined," he said. "Victoria brought a doctor who is willing to attest to your mental incapacity without even properly examining you. They have commitment papers already prepared." Arthur understood that he was facing not just a greedy sister, but an organized conspiracy that included professionals willing to violate their ethical oaths in exchange for financial compensation. The feeling of powerlessness was overwhelming. It was Lily who broke the ensuing silence. "Uncle Arthur, do you remember when I scared away the mountain lion? I was just a little girl, but I didn't run away. Sometimes you have to make noise, even when you're scared." Her simple words carried a deep truth that resonated in Arthur's heart. He had spent weeks running, hiding, trying to understand what was happening. Perhaps it was time to confront Victoria directly. But this time, armed with the knowledge he had acquired and with allies who believed his version of the facts. The decision to confront Victoria directly led Arthur and Lily back to the family estate late that afternoon. But this time, they were not alone. Father Benedict had discreetly contacted some respected members of the community, including Dr. Miller from the hospital and two long-time employees of the agribusiness company who had known Arthur for decades. When they arrived, they found a scene that perplexed Arthur. There were 3 cars parked at the entrance to the property, including a private ambulance. Victoria was on the porch, talking animatedly with a group of people, gesturing theatrically as she explained something that seemed very important. "She's putting on a show for an audience," Lily observed shrewdly, "like the performers in the town square." Indeed, Victoria had gathered a select group of witnesses to witness what she would describe as a psychotic episode from Arthur. Among those present were Dr. Morris, 2 paramedics from the ambulance, a lawyer Arthur didn't recognize, and surprisingly, 3 company employees who had always been loyal to him. When Arthur approached the group, accompanied by his witnesses, Victoria feigned a dramatic relief that couldn't hide the irritation in her eyes. "Arthur, thank God you're back," she exclaimed, rushing to hug him. "I was so worried. Dr. Maurice, this is my brother. You can see how worn out he is." The doctor examined Arthur with calculating eyes, clearly looking for signs of instability that would confirm the already prepared diagnosis. "Mr. Cunningham, how have you been feeling? Your sister told me about the episodes of confusion and paranoia." "Doctor," Arthur replied in a firm voice, "I'd like you to explain how you can make a diagnosis without ever having properly examined me. And I'd also like to know how much my sister is paying for your services." The direct question caught Dr. Maurice off guard. He hesitated for a moment before replying. "Mr. Cunningham, your aggressiveness only confirms what your sister reported to me. Paranoia is a common symptom in your condition." It was then that Dr. Miller from the community hospital spoke up. "Colleague, I have been examining Mr. Cunningham for 2 days and have found no evidence of mental instability. On the contrary, he demonstrates lucidity and coherence in all conversations." The presence of Dr. Miller clearly bothered Victoria, who had not anticipated that Arthur would be able to mobilize legitimate medical support. Her strategy depended on maintaining control over the information and the people involved in the situation. "Dr. Miller," she said with forced sweetness, "I understand your intention to help, but you are not a specialist in psychiatry. Dr. Maurice has years of experience in cases like this." "And where exactly did Dr. Maurice get this experience?" asked Father Benedict, joining the conversation. "Because according to my information, he was removed from the medical board in Richmond for questionable practices." The revelation fell like a bombshell on the group. Dr. Maurice visibly paled, And Victoria, for the first time since the whole situation began, seemed genuinely shaken. She had not done a proper background check on the doctor she had hired. "Those are slanderous lies," Dr. Maurice protested, but his voice betrayed his nervousness. "I have all the necessary documents to validate my medical practice." "Then you won't mind presenting them to the local medical board for verification," Dr. Miller suggested with calculated irony. It was at this moment that Lily decided to act. She addressed the group of company employees who had been brought as witnesses and began to speak with the brutal honesty that only a child can muster. "You've known Uncle Arthur for a long time?" she asked John, the company's oldest supervisor. "I've known him for 15 years, little girl," John replied, clearly confused as to why a child was participating in an adult conversation. "Has he ever done anything bad to you or the company?" "Never. He's always been a fair and honest boss." "Then why did you believe he went crazy all of a sudden?" Lily asked with relentless logic. The girl's simple question struck at the heart of the issue everyone had been avoiding. John and the other employees began to exchange uncomfortable glances, realizing they had accepted a version of the facts without proper questioning. "Ms. Victoria said he was sick," John murmured defensively. "And did you see him sick?" Lily insisted. "Did you see him do anything strange?" "Well, not exactly," John admitted, "but she showed papers from the doctor." "Papers can lie," Lily declared. "People can lie too. But the things you've seen with your own eyes don't lie." The girl's intervention had completely changed the dynamic of the situation. The employees began to question the information they had received, and even the lawyer Victoria had brought seemed uncomfortable with the developments. Victoria realized she was losing control of the narrative and decided to force an immediate resolution. "I will not allow my brother's mental state to be questioned by a street child," she exclaimed with poorly disguised anger. "Dr. Maurice, proceed with the evaluation. I have legal authorization to have him committed." "What authorization?" asked Father Benedict. "I would like to see these documents." Victoria hesitated, realizing she had put herself in a vulnerable position. The documents she had were based on the testimony of Dr. Maurice, whose credibility was now being publicly questioned. It was at that moment that something unexpected happened. An additional car arrived at the property, bringing a woman no one expected to see. She was a thin woman of about 60, with grey hair and simple clothes, who got out of the vehicle with visible determination. "Victoria Santos Cunningham," the woman said in a firm voice. "I need to speak with you about your daughter." The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria turned livid, clearly recognizing the unexpected visitor. Arthur looked confusedly between his sister and the stranger, not understanding the connection between them. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria said in a trembling voice. "Of course you do," the woman replied. "My name is Constance Moore, and I am Clara's mother, the mother of the girl standing next to your brother." Lily let out a cry of surprise and joy. "Grandma Constance, you know my mom?" "I do, my little granddaughter, and I've come to get you both." The revelation struck everyone like a thunderbolt. Lily was not a homeless child without a family, as Victoria had said. She had a mother and a grandmother who were looking for her, and somehow Victoria was involved in Clara's disappearance. "How did you find us?" Lily asked, running to hug the grandmother she hadn't seen in years. "A neighbor told me she saw a girl who looked like you here on the property. I came to investigate and discovered some very interesting things about Ms. Victoria's business." Constance looked directly at Victoria with an expression that mixed anger and determination. "You paid my daughter to disappear from town, didn't you? You told her the girl was better off without her, that rich people would take better care of the child." Victoria, tried to deny it, but her guilty expression was evident to everyone present. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I have receipts," Constance said coldly, pulling papers from her bag. "Bank transfers from your account to my daughter's. And I have witnesses that you told her Lily had been adopted by a wealthy family and that it would be better for everyone if she never came back." The plot was unraveling in a way no one had foreseen. Victoria had not only manipulated Arthur, she had destroyed a family, separating a mother from her daughter through elaborate lies and emotional blackmail. "Where is my mom?" Lily asked, her small voice filled with hope and fear. "In Richmond, my dear," Constance replied. "Working in a factory, saving money to come back and look for you. She never stopped loving you or thinking about you every day." Arthur looked at Victoria with a mixture of horror and understanding. His sister had orchestrated not only his own ruin, but had ruined the life of an entire family to get what she wanted. The extent of her cruelty was far greater than he had ever imagined possible. The revelation about Victoria's involvement in the separation of Lily and her mother created a tense silence that was broken only by the sound of Dr. Maurice discreetly trying to move toward his car. Father Benedict, noticing the maneuver, politely blocked his escape route. "Doctor, I believe it would be prudent to remain here while we clarify all these matters," the priest said firmly, "especially considering you brought commitment papers for a patient you never properly examined." Victoria tried to regain control of the situation, but her composure was visibly shaken. "You're all misunderstanding everything," she said, her voice sounding desperate for the first time. "I just tried to help that woman and her daughter. I gave them money because they were in need." "You lied to my daughter," Constance retorted with indignation. "You said Lily was better off without her, that she had found a rich family that could give her things a poor mother never could. You broke Clara's heart by making her believe it was for the best." Lily looked between the two women, trying to process information that completely changed her understanding of her own past. "My mom didn't abandon me because she didn't love me," she asked in a small voice. "Never. My little granddaughter," Constance replied, kneeling to be at the girl's level. "Your mother has cried every day since she left. She only took this woman's money because she thought she was doing what was best for you." John, the company supervisor, who had remained silent observing the whole situation, finally spoke up. "Mr. Arthur, if this woman was capable of separating a mother from her daughter with lies, what guarantee do we have that she didn't do the same thing to you?" The loyal employee's question echoed the thoughts of everyone present. Victoria's credibility had completely collapsed in the face of the evidence presented by Constance. If she had lied and manipulated one situation, how many other manipulations had she orchestrated? "I want to see all the documents you used to take control of my company," Arthur said to Victoria, his voice filled with an authority he hadn't shown in months. "Now." "Arthur, you're not thinking clearly," Victoria tried, but her previous strategy of questioning his sanity had lost all effectiveness in the face of the recent revelations. "On the contrary," Dr. Miller intervened, "he has never been more lucid, and I would very much like to examine these medical documents that supposedly attest to his incapacity. As his attending physician, I have an obligation to verify if there has been any forgery of medical reports." The situation was rapidly deteriorating for Victoria. Dr. Maurice, realizing he was being associated with a scandal that could completely destroy his career, decided to try to save himself. "Ms. Victoria," he said nervously, "I would like to clarify that I based my diagnosis entirely on the information you provided me, if that information was incorrect." "Are you suggesting you were deceived?" Father Benedict asked shrewdly. "Well, the circumstances were presented very convincingly," Dr. Maurice stammered. Victoria realized she was being abandoned by the very doctor she had bribed. Her web of lies was disintegrating rapidly, and she needed an exit strategy before the situation became completely untenable. "All right," she said finally, forcing a tone of resignation. "Perhaps I was overly concerned about Arthur's health. Perhaps I misinterpreted some signs. I may have made errors in judgment." "Errors in judgment?" Constance repeated indignantly. "You destroyed my family. You separated a mother from her daughter. That's not an error in judgment. It's calculated cruelty. And the medication you were giving me without my knowledge," Arthur added, "was that also an error in judgment?" Victoria fell silent, realizing that every answer only incriminated her further. The lawyer she had brought, a thin, nervous man who had remained quiet throughout the confrontation, finally spoke up. "Ms. Victoria, as your legal counsel, I recommend that you make no further statements without proper consultation," he said, clearly looking for a way to distance himself from the case. "How convenient," Father Benedict observed. "Now that the evidence is piling up, everyone starts recommending silence." It was at that moment that Lily did something no one expected. She approached Victoria and looked directly into the eyes of the woman who had destroyed her family. "Why did you do this to me and my mom?" she asked, with the devastating simplicity only a child can muster. "We never did anything bad to you." Victoria tried to look away, but there was something in Lily's direct, honest gaze that forced her to confront the reality of her actions. For a moment, her mask of justifications crumbled completely. I didn't want to hurt anyone," she murmured, but the words sounded empty even to herself. "But you did," Lily said simply. "You hurt us a lot. My mom cries because of me, and I cried because of her. Uncle Arthur got confused and sad. Why?" The question remained unanswered, but there was something in the vulnerability of the moment that opened an unexpected breach. Constance, observing the interaction, saw an opportunity to obtain crucial information. "Victoria," she said in a softer voice, "my daughter has been suffering for years, thinking she abandoned her own child. If you have any conscience left, tell me where I can find her to reunite our family." The appeal touched something deep within Victoria, perhaps a last vestige of humanity that her actions had not managed to completely destroy. "She's working in a textile factory in Richmond," she said quietly. "She lives in a boarding house in the Fan district. I have the address." "I'm going to get my mom," Lily exclaimed, running to hug Constance. "Are we going to get her now?" "We are, my little granddaughter," Constance replied, but looking firmly at Victoria. "But first, this woman is going to undo all the mess she has created." Arthur, watching the whole scene, felt a complex mix of emotions. There was anger at Victoria's betrayal, relief at finally understanding what was happening, but also a deep sadness at realizing he had forever lost the sister he thought he knew. "Victoria," he said finally, "I want you to undo all the false documents, return control of the company, and leave my property. I don't want to see you again." "Arthur, we're brother and sister," she tried one last time. "Siblings don't do what you did," he replied with finality. "Siblings protect each other. They don't destroy their lives for personal gain." Dr. Maurice took the opportunity to try and slip away again, but John and the other company employees, now fully convinced they had been deceived, blocked his exit. "Doctor," John said firmly, "you have false documents that need to be explained to the proper authorities." The situation had completely reversed. Victoria and Dr. Morris, who had arrived with plans to forcibly commit Arthur, now found themselves surrounded by witnesses to their own manipulations and crimes. The sun was setting over the orchards of Oakhaven as Father Benedict took the initiative to organize the next steps. I believe we all agree that this situation needs to be resolved through the proper channels, he said diplomatically. Constance, you and Lily need to go to Richmond to reunite your family. Dr. Miller, we need to properly document all the medical evidence. And Arthur, you need to formally regain control of your company. And me? Victoria asked in a small voice, finally facing the consequences of her actions. You, Arthur said, looking at his sister for the last time, need to learn to live with what you've done. That night, as the visitors departed and the property finally returned to silence, Arthur and Lily sat on the porch contemplating the stars shining over the orchards. Tomorrow, the girl would leave to reunite with her mother, closing the most painful but also the most transformative chapter of their lives. Are you going to miss me? Lily asked, snuggling up next to Arthur. A lot, he replied, hugging the girl who had saved not only his life, but his sanity and his dignity. But I'll be happy knowing you're with your real family. But they both knew the story wasn't over yet, and that the coming days would bring revelations that would change their lives in ways they couldn't even imagine. The trip to Richmond happened the next morning, with Arthur insisting on accompanying Constance and Lily. He had spent a sleepless night organizing company documents and discovering the true extent of the damage Victoria had caused. The fraudulent contract she had signed in his name compromised not only his personal finances, but also put the jobs of all 50 employees at risk. During the 3-hour drive through the rolling hills that connected Oakhaven to the capital, Lily remained silent most of the time, looking out the window and processing the reality that she would finally reunite with her mother. Constance told stories about Clara, describing a hard-working, loving woman who had sacrificed to give her daughter the best. Your mother has always been stubborn, Constance said affectionately. When she decided something, there was no one who could make her change her mind. That's how she managed to teach herself to read, studying at night after work. Will she still like me? Lily asked, with a vulnerability that broke the adults' hearts. My dear, Constance replied, your mother never stopped loving you for a second. She has a picture of you she's carried in her wallet for 4 years, all worn out from looking at it so much. The textile factory where Clara worked was in an industrial part of Richmond, surrounded by similar companies that mostly employed women from the countryside seeking better opportunities. The building was large and functional, with small windows and a courtyard where employees had their meals during breaks. When they arrived at the front desk, Constance explained to the security guard that she needed to speak urgently with her daughter. The man, a kind gentleman who knew Clara by name, was intrigued to hear that the lost daughter had been found. Ms. Clara always talks about her little girl, he commented. I'll call her. To the front. But if I may offer some advice, take it slow. This woman has suffered a lot all these years. Clara appeared a few minutes later, still wearing her blue factory uniform and a worried expression. At 31, she had inherited her mother's delicate features, but her face showed the weariness of someone who had worked hard to overcome a deep pain. When she saw Constance at the front desk, her first reaction was confusion. Mom, what are you doing here? Did something happen? It was then that she saw the small girl standing next to Constance, and the world stopped for a few eternal seconds. Clara immediately recognized the brown eyes, the shape of the face, the shy way of tilting her head that was identical to her own in childhood. Lily, she whispered, as if saying the name could make the vision disappear. Hi, Mommy, Lily said simply, but her voice trembled with all the emotion she had held in for 4 long years. Clara ran to her daughter and picked her up, hugging her with a force that seemed to want to make up for all the lost time. They both cried, but they were tears of pure joy that deeply touched everyone present, including the security guard who discreetly wiped his own eyes. My girl, my dear girl, Clara repeated, covering Lily's face with kisses. How you've grown, how beautiful you are. I thought you didn't love me anymore, Lily confessed, hugging her mother's neck. Never. I never stopped loving you for a second, Clara replied vehemently. Every day I thought of you, every day I wanted to come back, but I thought you were better off without me. Constance quickly explained about Victoria and the manipulation that had separated mother and daughter. As the story unfolded, Clara went through anger, relief, and a deep sadness as she realized she had been deceived about what was best for her daughter. She told me you had been adopted by a wealthy family, Clara explained, still holding Lily in her arms. She said they had the resources to give you education, healthcare, opportunities I could never offer. I believed it because I wanted the best for you. But I just wanted to be with you, Lily said. It didn't matter if we were poor, we were happy together. Arthur, watching the emotional reunion, felt a mixture of joy and melancholy. He was happy to witness this moment of healing for a family that had been deliberately destroyed. But he also knew it meant losing the company of the girl who had become so important in his life. Over the next few hours, Clara asked for time off from work, and they went to the small boarding house where she lived. The room was simple but clean, decorated only with a few family photographs and the picture of baby Lily that Constance had mentioned. I kept everything that was yours, Clara said, opening a box with children's clothes, simple toys, and drawings Lily had made before the separation. I always knew that one day you would come back to me. It was during this intimate conversation between mother and daughter that Arthur received a call that would completely change the course of the situation. It was John from the company with urgent news. Mr. Arthur, John said in a tense voice, Ms. Victoria returned to the company this morning with two men I don't know. They're saying they have a court order to seal the premises. Arthur's blood ran cold. Victoria was using her last resort, trying to destroy the company if she couldn't control it. What kind of court order? Something about outstanding debts and tax irregularities. But, sir, these documents they showed, some employees suspect they might be forgeries. Arthur realized he needed to return to Oakhaven immediately. Victoria had escalated the situation to a level that could destroy not only his personal life, but also the livelihood of dozens of families who depended on the company. When he explained the situation to Clara and Constance, they insisted on returning with him. That woman destroyed our family, Clara said with determination. Now she's trying to destroy other people. We're not going to let that happen. The return trip was tense and silent. Lily, who had finally been reunited with her mother, now faced the possibility of seeing Arthur lose everything because of the same person who had caused so much suffering to her family. Uncle Arthur, she said during the drive, you're not going to give up, are you? No, he replied firmly. This time, we're going to see it through to the end. Victoria must be stopped from causing any more damage. When they arrived in Oakhaven late that afternoon, they found a crowd gathered in front of the agribusiness. The employees were outside, barred from entering their own workplace by two intimidating-looking men who claimed to have legal authority to seal the company. Father Benedict was present, trying to mediate the situation, but it was clear that it had escalated beyond his ability to intervene. Dr. Miller was also there, along with several families of employees who depended on the company for their survival. The situation is very tense, the priest explained when Arthur approached. Victoria showed up with these men, claiming you signed documents committing the company to debts that cannot be paid. The documents look official. Where is she now? Inside the company, supposedly taking an inventory of the assets to be seized. Arthur looked at the crowd of employees and their families, people who had trusted him to provide stability and security. The anger he felt for Victoria turned into a cold, calculated determination. Father, he said, I need to get into that company and confront my sister one last time. But this time, I want everyone to see exactly who Victoria Santos Cunningham is." Lily held Arthur's hand. "We're going with you," she said, looking at Clara. "And Constance, our family was destroyed by her too. It's time to stop this woman." At that moment, Arthur realized he was no longer alone in facing Victoria's betrayal. He had a support network by his side that included not only Lily's reunited family, but also an entire community that had finally understood the truth of the situation. The final battle was about to begin, and this time Victoria would not have the advantage of manipulation and deceit. The truth had been revealed, and now it was time to face the consequences of years of lies and calculated cruelty. The confrontation at the agribusiness took place under the watchful eyes of the entire Oakhaven community. When Arthur approached the company entrance, the two men guarding the door tried to stop him, claiming they had court orders to keep everyone away from the premises. "This is my company," Arthur said with authority, "and I want to see these documents you're using to justify this invasion." "Sir, we're just following orders," replied one of the men, a burly individual with an intimidating appearance. "Ms. Victoria hired us to ensure the assets are preserved during the inventory process." "Hired with what money?" asked Clara, approaching with Lily by the hand. "Because if she used company funds to pay you, that's embezzlement." Clara's observation caught the men off guard. It was clear they hadn't considered the legal implications of accepting payment from someone who had no legitimate authority over the company's resources. Father Benedict seized the moment of hesitation to intervene. "Gentlemen, I suggest you allow the rightful owner to enter his own company. The presence of so many witnesses makes this situation quite delicate from a legal standpoint." Reluctantly, the men stepped aside, allowing Arthur to enter the facility he had built with 3 decades of hard work. The inside of the company was in complete disarray. Files had been removed from cabinets, equipment was being catalogued, and several boxes were stacked near the exit, apparently prepared for removal. Victoria was in the main office, supervising 2 employees she had brought to do the inventory. When she saw Arthur enter, accompanied by a group that included Lily, Clara, and Constance, her expression revealed a mixture of surprise and poorly concealed desperation. "Arthur," she exclaimed, trying to regain the authoritative tone she had used the day before, "you shouldn't be here. We are conducting an official inventory of the company's assets to cover the debts you incurred." "What debts?" Arthur asked directly. "And with whom?" Victoria hesitated, clearly not expecting to be questioned on specific details. They're complex issues. Contracts you signed during your episodes of mental confusion." "Show me the contracts," demanded Dr. Miller, who had entered the company with the group. "As Mr. Cunningham's attending physician, I would like to correlate the dates of these supposed contracts with his documented state of health." It was at this moment that something unexpected happened. One of the employees Victoria had brought to do. The inventory nervously approached Arthur. "Sir," he whispered, "I need to speak with you in private. There's something very wrong with this situation." Victoria tried to intercept the conversation, but Lily, with her childish insight, created a diversion by asking loudly, "Aunt Victoria, why did you make my mum cry so much?" The simple but devastating question from the girl focused everyone's attention on Victoria, allowing the inventory employee to slip away with Arthur to a corner of the company. "Mr. Cunningham," the man said softly, "my name is Anthony, and I work for an accounting firm in Richmond. Ms. Victoria hired us to do this inventory, but the documents she presented, some have obvious erasures, others have dates that don't make sense." "What kind of inconsistencies?" "Contracts signed on dates when you were in the hospital, according to the medical records she herself provided. Signatures that vary significantly from other documents we know to be authentic. And most importantly, debts to companies that don't even officially exist." The revelation confirmed Arthur's worst suspicions. Victoria had not only forged his signature, but had created an elaborate scheme of fictitious debts to justify the seizure of the company. "Anthony," Arthur said, discreetly, "can you document these inconsistencies officially?" "I can, and I must, sir. My firm does not want to be associated with fraud. We were being deceived as much as you were." Meanwhile, Lily continued to ask Victoria uncomfortable questions, with the natural persistence of a child who does not accept evasive answers. "My mum worked hard to save money and come back for me," she said. "Why did you lie to her that I didn't need her anymore?" "Little girl, you don't understand these adult matters," Victoria attempted, but her voice sounded less and less convincing. "Yes, I do," Lily replied. "I understand that you separated our family on purpose. I understand that you made Uncle Arthur confused with medicine. I understand that you are a bad person." Lily's direct and honest assessment echoed through the halls of the company, heard by all the employees who had managed to enter the premises. Many of them had known Arthur for years and began to publicly express their outrage at the situation. "Ms. Victoria," said Mary, an employee who had worked at the company for 15 years, "Mr. Arthur has always been honest with us. He never hid company problems or failed to pay our salaries. How could you do this to your own brother?" Other employees began to speak out, sharing their own experiences with Arthur and expressing disbelief that he could have incurred irresponsible debts. The narrative Victoria had built was crumbling in the face of the collective testimony of people who knew Arthur's true character. It was at this moment that Constance made a crucial intervention. "Victoria," she said in a firm voice, "you destroyed my family, tried to destroy your brother's company, and now you're trying to steal the livelihood of all these honest people. But I have something that might interest everyone here." Constance took an envelope from her purse that contained documents and photographs. "I spent the last 2 days investigating you, woman. I found out you've done this before." "I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria murmured, but her pallor revealed growing nervousness. 3 years ago, you tried to take control of a widow's property in a nearby county using similar tactics," Constance continued. "You claimed the woman was senile, presented false medical reports, even got a fraudulent power of attorney. The difference is that in that case, the woman's children found out. In time, the revelation that Victoria was an experienced con artist, not just a greedy sister, completely changed the perception of everyone present. This was not an isolated case of family greed, but a criminal pattern of exploiting vulnerable people. "I have here," Constance said, showing the documents, "copies of the lawsuits filed against Victoria Santos Cunningham for attempted fraud, forgery of documents, and embezzlement. She was sentenced to restitution and probation. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria had built her reputation as a respectable, family-oriented woman, but in reality, she was an experienced criminal who had chosen Arthur as her next victim. John, the loyal supervisor, addressed Victoria directly. "You will leave this company now," he said firmly, "and you will undo all this mess you've created, or we will hand these documents over to the authorities." "You can't kick me out," Victoria tried, but her voice had lost all authority. "I have legal rights." "Rights based on forged documents," interrupted Anthony the accountant, "which I can prove are forgeries with technical analysis." Victoria looked around, realizing she was completely surrounded by people who knew the truth about her actions. Her web of lies had completely disintegrated, and there was no way to maintain the facade. "All right," she said finally, her mask of indignation crumbling to reveal defeat. "Perhaps I misinterpreted some situations. Perhaps I made hasty decisions." "It wasn't a misinterpretation," Lily said. with the devastating clarity that characterized all her observations. It was just plain meanness. Clara hugged her daughter, proud of the courage she showed even in the face of such a complex situation. "My girl is right," she said. "Some things are that simple. What you did was deliberate malice, and now you need to fix the damage." That afternoon, under the supervision of the entire Oakhaven community, Victoria was forced to sign documents undoing all the fraudulent transactions, returning full control of the company to Arthur, and committing to reimbursing all the damages caused. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come, when Father Benedict made a discovery in the company's files that would forever change everyone's understanding of the true relationship between Lily and the Cunningham family. Father Benedict had remained silent throughout the confrontation with Victoria, but while the fraudulent documents were being undone, he discreetly leafed through some old company files that had been scattered during the fake inventory. It was in a dusty folder dated 28 years ago that he found documents that would make everything fall into a completely new light. "Arthur," the priest called out in a strangely tense voice, "you need to see this immediately." Arthur approached, still supervising Victoria as she signed the restitution documents. The priest held an old birth certificate and some business registration papers that seemed to have been filed away and forgotten for decades. "What did you find, Father?" "Documents about your younger brother, Elliot," the priest replied carefully. "Records showing he briefly worked at the company before the accident." Arthur frowned. Elliot had been the youngest of the family, 10 years younger than him and 15 years younger than Victoria. He had worked at the company for only 6 months before suffering the work accident that took his life at 22, an event so painful the family rarely spoke of it. "Why would that be important now?" Arthur asked, but there was something in the priest's tone that suggested a significant discovery. "Because there are records here that Elliot was a father. Arthur, he had a daughter." The priest's words echoed like thunder in the already tense atmosphere of the company. Arthur felt the world spin slightly around him. "That's impossible. Elliot never mentioned having a daughter, and he was single when the accident happened. According to these documents, he was in a relationship with a young woman named Clara Moore. And there is a copy here of the birth certificate of a child born 7 months after Elliot's passing." The absolute silence that followed was broken only by the sound of papers falling from Clara's hands. She was pale, looking between the priest and Arthur with an expression of total shock. "Elliot Cunningham," she murmured, as if testing the sound of the name. He said his name was Eli. He never mentioned his full last name." "Mom," Lily said with concern, "are you okay?" Constance held her granddaughter's hand, herself processing the implications of the revelation. "Clara, you never told me the full name of Lily's father. You always just said he had passed away before she was born." "Because that's what happened," Clara replied in a trembling voice. "Eli worked at a coffee company. He said he was going to introduce me to his family when he finished an important project. Then one day, he just disappeared. I thought he had abandoned me when he found out about the pregnancy." Arthur looked at Lily with completely new eyes. The brave girl who had saved his life, who had become the light amidst the chaos created by Victoria, was in fact his niece. The daughter of the brother he had lost prematurely and for whose passing he carried guilt to this day. "Lily is my niece," he said in a low voice, as if he needed to hear the words to believe them. Father Benedict continued examining the documents. "There's more, Arthur." Elliot had left. Instructions on what to do if something happened to him. He wanted his daughter to be officially recognized as an heiress of the Cunningham family. "Why did I never know about this?" Arthur asked, a new anger beginning to burn in his chest. It was at this moment that all eyes turned to Victoria, who had remained silent since the documents were found. Her expression revealed not surprise, but guilt, the guilt of someone who had known the truth for a long time. "Victoria," the priest said, in a voice that demanded an answer, "you knew. I couldn't allow it," she murmured, finally revealing the real reason behind all her cruelty. A bastard child, the daughter of a poor woman, claiming rights to the family estate. It would destroy our reputation, divide the inheritance. "So you made Clara disappear," Constance completed, with growing indignation. "It wasn't just recently. You had tried before when you found out about the pregnancy." Victoria did not deny it. Her mask had completely fallen, revealing the calculating woman who had orchestrated years of suffering to protect her own financial interests. "Elliot was planning to marry her," Victoria confessed. "He was going to officially recognize the child, give her rights to everything our family built. I couldn't allow it." "The accident," Arthur said slowly, a terrible suspicion forming in his mind. "Elliot's accident." "It was an accident," Victoria said quickly. "I had nothing to do with it. But when he was gone, I saw an opportunity to solve the problem for good." Victoria's partial confession revealed the extent of her malice. She had taken advantage of the tragedy of Elliot's premature death to eliminate any trace of his relationship with Clara, ensuring the child would never know her true heritage. "You destroyed two families," Clara said, with tears in her eyes. "Mine and your own brother's. You prevented Lily from knowing her father's side of the family, prevented Arthur from knowing he had a niece." Lily, slowly processing all these adult revelations, asked the simplest and most devastating question: "Does this mean Uncle Arthur is really my blood family?" "It means you are a Cunningham," Arthur replied, kneeling to be at the girl's level. "It means your father was my younger brother, and I should have taken care of you since you were born." The tears in Arthur's eyes were not just of joy at discovering he had a niece, but of deep sorrow for all the lost years. Years in which Lily had lived on the streets, suffered deprivation, faced dangers, while he lived isolated on his property, unaware that his younger brother's daughter desperately needed a family. "That's why you seemed familiar from the first moment," he murmured. "You have Elliot's eyes, his same determination." John, who had known Elliot during his months at the company, approached emotionally. "Mr. Arthur, now that I look closely, the resemblance is undeniable. Elliot had that same way of tilting his head when he was thinking." The people present began to notice family traits that had been ignored, resemblances that made sense now that the connection was revealed. Lily had not saved a stranger on the road. She had saved her own uncle, the brother of the father she had never known. Dr. Miller, observing the whole situation, made an observation that touched everyone present. "It's extraordinary how fate works. Lily found Arthur exactly when they both needed each other most, as if Elliot had sent his daughter to take care of his brother." Victoria, realizing her last justification had been destroyed, made a desperate attempt to regain some control over the situation. "Even if it's true," she said, "it doesn't change anything. The girl is an illegitimate child. She has no legal rights." "Yes, she does," Father Benedict interrupted firmly. "Elliot left documents acknowledging paternity and expressing his desire to legitimize the child. These documents have legal value." Anthony, the accountant who had exposed Victoria's forgeries, spoke up. "Furthermore, considering that Ms. Victoria deliberately concealed these documents and manipulated the situation to prevent the child's legitimate recognition, she can be prosecuted for suppression of documents and inheritance fraud." The magnitude of the legal consequences Victoria would face began to become clear. It was not just about undoing recent frauds, but about answering for decades of manipulation that had deprived a child of her rightful inheritance and her family of knowing her. Clara held her daughter tightly, finally understanding why she had felt so lost after Eli's departure. She had not only lost a boyfriend, but the father of her child, and an entire family that could have welcomed and supported them both through all these difficult years. "Lily," Arthur said gently, "would you like to come live with me, officially, as my niece and heiress?" "But what about my mom?" Lily asked, looking between Arthur and Clara. "Your mother would be very welcome too," Arthur replied without hesitation. "Our house is large, and after all these years apart, our family needs to be together." It was at that moment that something no one had foreseen happened. The sirens of approaching police cars echoed across the property, signaling the arrival of authorities Constance had discreetly contacted during the confrontation. Victoria had lost her last chance to escape the consequences of decades of calculated evil. The truth had finally emerged, but the price everyone would pay for her years of suffering was still being calculated. The authorities who arrived at the property were not ordinary police officers, but representatives from the district attorney's office, accompanied by forensic document experts. Constance had been more strategic than anyone had imagined, contacting not only local authorities but also state agencies specializing in financial crimes and document fraud. Victoria, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried one last desperate maneuver. "You don't understand," she said to the investigators. "My brother is facing serious psychiatric problems. This is all a result of his paranoia and the fantasies of this street child." But her strategy didn't work this time. Dr. Miller immediately presented Arthur's updated medical reports, proving his full mental capacity. Anthony, the accountant, provided a detailed technical analysis of the document forgeries, and Constance presented all the evidence she had collected about Victoria's previous criminal activities. The forensic document expert, a meticulous, middle-aged man, examined the fraudulent contracts with specialized equipment he had brought. "The discrepancies are obvious," he announced after a preliminary analysis. "Different types of ink, inconsistent writing pressure, and most importantly, overlapping signatures that indicate an attempt at imitation." As the authorities conducted their investigations, an even more shocking discovery emerged from the company's files. Father Benedict, continuing his search through the old documents, found correspondence between Elliot and Arthur that had never been delivered. "Arthur," the priest said with an emotional voice, "Elliot wrote you several letters in the weeks before the accident, letters that apparently never reached you. The letters, written in Elliot's young and enthusiastic handwriting, revealed a side of the story that had been completely suppressed. In them, the young man talked about his love for Clara, his wedding plans, and his joy about her pregnancy. Most importantly, he asked his older brother for advice on how to take on paternal and business responsibilities." "Arthur," the priest read from one of the letters, "I'm so happy and scared at the same time. Clara is expecting our baby, and I want to do everything right. I know you can teach me to be a good father and a good businessman. I can't wait for you to meet the woman I love and the child that is coming." Elliot's words, preserved for nearly 3 decades, deeply touched Arthur. He realized his younger brother had tried to include him in his happiness, but someone had intercepted these communications, preventing the family from uniting at the most important moment. "Victoria," Arthur said, with a controlled but emotion-filled voice, "you intercepted Elliot's letters." I was protecting the family," she murmured, but her defense sounded pathetic even to herself. "You were protecting your inheritance," Clara corrected angrily. You prevented a family from knowing its own joy, prevented a child from growing up knowing who her father was. Lily, who had listened to everything in silence, approached Arthur. Uncle, can you read more letters from my dad? I want to know him through his words. The girl's simple request made everyone realize the dimension of what had been stolen from her. Not just a family and an inheritance, but the knowledge of her own father, his words, his dreams, his personality. Arthur knelt beside Lily and began to read another letter. Clara is drawing how she imagines our baby will be. She says she hopes it has my eyes, but I hope it has her sweet heart. I want to teach our child about the orchards, about how our family built all this with honest work. The tears in Lily's eyes were not of sadness, but of a complex joy at finally knowing something about the father she had never met. Clara hugged her daughter, herself moved to hear the words of the man she had loved again. The investigators from the district attorney's office had finished their preliminary analysis and approached the group. Ms. Victoria Santos Cunningham, said the lead prosecutor, you are under arrest for document forgery, embezzlement, mail fraud, and inheritance fraud. You will have to accompany us to give formal statements. Victoria was taken into custody, but before getting into the patrol car, she turned one last time to Arthur. I only wanted to protect what our family built, she said in a final attempt to justify decades of cruelty. Our family included Elliot, Arthur replied with finality. It included Clara and Lily. You destroyed our family to protect money. In the following weeks, as the legal proceedings ran their course, the Cunningham estate underwent a complete transformation. Clara had left her job in Richmond and moved to Oakhaven with Lily, occupying the room that had been Elliot's and that Arthur had kept untouched for almost 3 decades. The agribusiness also transformed. With Victoria permanently out of the picture and Arthur regaining his full administrative capacity, the business flourished. Again. But more importantly, he began to teach Lily about the company that would one day be her rightful inheritance. This will be your office when you grow up, he said, showing her a room adjacent to his own office that was being renovated especially for her. Your father wanted you to know every aspect of the family business. Lily, now 5 and visibly happier and more secure, absorbed everything with curiosity. Can I help take care of the workers like you do? Of course you can. That's what our family has always done. We take care of each other. Doctor Miller visited regularly to monitor the family's adaptation to the new situation. It's remarkable, he observed, how Lily has blossomed now that she has finally found her place in the world. The emotional security has made all the difference. Constance had also moved to Oakhaven, occupying a small house in town that Arthur had acquired specifically for her. I want to be close to my granddaughter, she had said, especially after so many lost years. Father Benedict officially celebrated Lily's recognition as an heiress of the Cunningham family in a special ceremony at the local church, blessing the reunification of a family that had been deliberately fragmented. God uses even the most painful situations to reveal his goodness, he said during the ceremony. John and the other company employees embraced Lily as if she were a princess who had finally returned to her kingdom. We always knew there was something special about her, commented Mary, the oldest employee. Now we understand why. But it was during a quiet evening, when Arthur was teaching Lily to identify the different stars in the sky, that she made an observation that perfectly summed up the entire journey they had shared. Uncle Arthur, she said, do you think my dad knew I was going to find you? Arthur looked at the girl who had saved his life in ways she couldn't even fully comprehend. I think so, Lily. I think he knew we needed each other. And do you think he's happy now? I'm sure he is. His daughter is finally where she always should have been, at home with her family. That night, for the first time in decades, the Cunningham estate echoed with genuine laughter. Clara sang in the kitchen while preparing dinner, Constance told stories to Lily in the living room, and Arthur finally felt complete. But there was still one last surprise awaiting the family, a discovery that would be revealed during the final clean-out of Elliot's files, something he had left specifically for his daughter, in case something happened to him before he could meet her. 6 months after Victoria's arrest, during the final clearing out of Elliot's belongings that had been stored in the attic for nearly 3 decades, Constance made a discovery that would move the entire family. Hidden in a wooden box, she found a sealed letter addressed to my daughter when she grows up, and a small safe with a numerical combination written on the envelope. "Arthur!" Constance called in a trembling voice. "You need to see this immediately!" When the whole family gathered in the dusty attic, Constance showed them the findings with reverence. The letter was perfectly preserved, and the small but heavy box suggested it contained something valuable that Elliot had specifically reserved for his daughter. "Lily," Arthur said softly, "your father left something special for you." The girl, now 5.5 and visibly more mature after the transformative events of the past year, held the letter carefully. "Can I open it now?" "Of course you can, my dear," Clara replied, sitting next to her daughter to support her during the emotional moment. With small but determined hands, Lily carefully opened the envelope and took out several sheets of paper written in Elliot's affectionate handwriting. Arthur offered to read it aloud, and she accepted, eager to hear the words of the father she had never known. "My dearest daughter," Arthur began, his voice choked with emotion, "if you are reading this letter, it means something happened to me before we could meet. But I want you to know that every day, since I learned of your existence, has been the happiest of my life." Elliot's words echoed through the silent attic, carrying a love that had crossed decades to finally reach its recipient. Lily listened intently, absorbing every word like a precious gift. "You will be born into a family of hard-working and honest people. Your Uncle Arthur is the most upright man I know, and I know he will take care of you if I cannot. Your mother, Clara, is the bravest and most caring woman in the world, and I know she will be a wonderful mother," Clara began, to cry silently, touched by the words of love Elliot had written about her decades ago. Constance held her hand, offering emotional support during this moment of reconnection with the past. "In the box that accompanies this letter," Arthur continued reading, "there is something that belonged to my father and his father before him. It is a ring with the Cunningham family's lucky stone, and I want it to be yours when you turn 18. But there is also something I made especially for you." Lily opened the small box with the combination Elliot had provided. Inside was a delicate gold ring with a small but brilliant emerald, and also a pendant in the shape of a small bird, exactly like the birds she always drew. "My goodness," murmured Constance, "how did he know she would love birds?" Arthur continued reading the letter. "I had this little bird pendant made because I want you to always remember that you can fly high, no matter where life takes you. Birds are free, brave, and always find their way back home, as I hope you will." Lily held the pendant against her chest, finally understanding why she had always felt connected to birds. It was as if her father had planted this affinity in her heart before she was even born. "There's something else," Elliot said through the words Arthur read. "If something happens to me, I want you to know that our property has a hidden treasure. It's not gold or money, but something more valuable. In the oldest orchard near the century-old tree, there is a spring of pure mineral water that can bring prosperity to our family for many generations." The revelation about the spring was a complete surprise to Arthur. He knew every foot of the property, but He had never discovered this water source that his younger brother had found and kept secret. "Why did Elliot never tell me about this?" he asked, confused. "Maybe because he wanted to leave it as a special inheritance for his daughter," Clara suggested. "Something that would be just hers." Elliot's letter ended with words that deeply touched everyone present. "My daughter, I hope that when you grow up you will understand that true love never ends, even when we cannot be physically present. Every time you look at the stars, remember that your father is always watching over you. Be brave, be kind, and never forget that you are loved." When Arthur finished reading, the attic was completely silent, except for the soft sobs of emotion from everyone present. Lily hugged the letter to her chest, finally having the words of love from her father that she had waited her whole life to hear. In the following days, the family explored the old orchard and found the spring Elliot had mentioned. It was a crystal-clear source that bubbled naturally from the earth, with water of exceptional quality that could indeed represent an additional source of income for the property. "Elliot was always a visionary," commented Father Benedict when he heard of the discovery. "Even leaving so young, he managed to leave a legacy that will benefit his family for generations." Dr. Miller suggested that the water be analyzed by experts, and the results confirmed that it had valuable mineral properties. "With proper management, this spring can generate enough income to guarantee Lily's college education and much more," he explained. The transformation in everyone's lives was complete when 1 year after the events that reunited the family, they celebrated the first anniversary of discovering the truth about Lily. The party took place at the same spot where she had saved Arthur from the mountain lion, now transformed into a small memorial garden in honor of Elliot. "You know," Lily said to Arthur during the celebration, "I think the mountain lion that day wasn't trying to scare me. I think it was guiding me to you." Arthur smiled, understanding that his niece had developed a special wisdom about how life works in mysterious ways. "It could be. Sometimes angels use different forms to take care of us." Clara, who now worked in the administration of the family company and had become a valuable business partner, watched her daughter with pride. "She saved your life that day," she said to Arthur, "but you saved ours too." "We saved each other," Arthur corrected. "That's what families do." The agribusiness prospered under the joint management of Arthur and Clara, with the mineral water project adding a new dimension to the business. More importantly, they created an educational fund for all the children of Oakhaven, ensuring that no child would go through the hardships Lily had faced. Victoria was sentenced to 5 years in prison and full restitution of all fraudulent amounts. During the trial, she finally publicly admitted the extent of her manipulations and asked the family for forgiveness, although everyone knew some wounds would take a long time to heal. Constance became the dedicated grandmother she had dreamed of being, telling stories about Elliot to Lily and helping the girl understand her family heritage through preserved, loving memories. Father Benedict celebrated Lily's first communion in the church, where it all began to resolve, officially blessing her full integration into the Oakhaven community as the rightful heiress of the Cunningham family. On the eve of Lily's 6th birthday, as they watched the sunset over the orchards that were now truly hers, Arthur made a reflection that summed up the entire extraordinary journey they had shared. "You know, Lily, when you saved me from that mountain lion, I thought you had simply saved me from a dangerous animal. Now I realize you saved me from something much worse, from a life without purpose, without family, without love. And you saved me from a life of not knowing who I really was," she replied, now a confident and beloved girl. "We're a family of saviors." That night, for the first time since Elliot's premature passing, the Cunningham estate resonated with genuine laughter, plans for the future, and the certainty that true love always finds a way to prevail, even against the cruelest adversities. The mountain lion was never seen in the region again, but Lily always held the certainty that it had been sent by her father to guide her to her true family. And so, in a small town in Virginia, a brave girl and a lost man discovered that sometimes fate uses the most unlikely encounters to heal broken hearts and reunite families separated by time and human malice. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.